My name is Emily Harper, and I was 31 years old when I learned that the person I trusted most was willing to erase me from my own child's life. At the time, I thought I had everything I had always wanted: a loving relationship, a home, a baby on the way. My boyfriend Daniel Carter and I had been together for 2 years. 6 months earlier, we moved into an apartment together, the kind of place where we started imagining our future. We had talked about baby names, painted imaginary nursery walls in our heads, and spent countless nights lying in bed, wondering what our daughter or son would look like. At least that was what I thought we were building. I never imagined that my entire future could collapse because of one text message. The day everything changed, I was sitting in the waiting room of Daniel's first prenatal appointment with me. Well, technically, it was our first appointment together. I remember the smell of disinfectant in the air, the quiet conversations around me, and the nervous excitement I felt. I kept touching my stomach, even though I was only a few weeks along. It was still early, but I already felt connected to the little life growing inside me. Daniel sat beside me, scrolling through his phone. Or at least that was what I thought he was doing. A few minutes later, my own phone buzzed. I looked down. It was a message from Daniel. At first, I thought, maybe he was joking. Maybe he was sending me some silly meme because he was nervous. But when I opened it, my entire body went cold. Emily, I've been thinking about something. When the baby comes, I'm going to put Samantha's name on the paperwork instead. It's easier for insurance. You know the truth, and that's what matters. I read it again. And again. My hands actually started shaking. Samantha, his ex-girlfriend. The woman he told me he had completely moved on from. The woman he said he hadn't spoken to in over a year. I slowly looked up from my phone. Daniel was sitting less than 10 feet away from me. He wasn't looking at me. He was staring at his screen with a calm expression, like he hadn't just sent a message that shattered everything I believed about our relationship. Through the glass doors, I could see the nurse preparing the exam room. The appointment we had been excited about. The appointment where I thought we would hear our baby's heartbeat for the first time. Instead, I was sitting there realizing my boyfriend had already planned a future where I wasn't even officially recognized. I wanted to stand up. I wanted to scream. I wanted to ask him how he could look at me every day while secretly planning something like this. But I didn't. Because something inside me told me to stay calm, to understand exactly what he was doing before I reacted. So, I typed one word. Okay, that was it. One word. Daniel immediately looked at his phone. A few seconds later, he smiled. Then he looked up at me through the glass and gave me a thumbs up. Like I had just agreed to pick up groceries after work. Like this was normal. Like he hadn't just told me he wanted another woman connected to our child legally. The nurse called his name. Daniel, we're ready for you. He stood up. You coming? I forced myself to smile. Yeah, give me a minute. He nodded and walked inside. But I didn't follow. I sat there for another 30 seconds staring at the door. Then I stood up, walked outside, and got into my car. I sat there with both hands gripping the steering wheel. I didn't cry. Not yet. I think my mind was still trying to understand how someone could betray me so casually. 2 years together. 6 months living together. A baby growing inside me. And somehow Daniel had convinced himself that making his ex part of our child's legal identity was a reasonable solution. After about 20 minutes, I made my first call. I called my friend, Olivia Bennett. She worked as a family law paralegal, and while I never expected to need her professional advice, I knew I needed someone who understood the legal side of what was happening. When she answered, she immediately knew something was wrong. Emily, what happened? I took a deep breath. Hypothetically, if someone knowingly puts another person's name on a birth certificate, when they know that person isn't the parent, what would that be? There was a pause. That depends on the situation, Olivia said carefully. But if someone intentionally provides false information on legal documents, that can become a serious issue. And if the person whose name is used later proves they were lied to, then they could potentially have grounds for legal action. Fraud, financial damages, emotional distress. I stared out the windshield. Interesting. Emily, why are you asking me this? I swallowed. I'll explain later. After hanging up, I sat there for another minute. Then I stopped feeling shocked, and I started making decisions. The first thing I did was call our landlord. Our apartment lease had switched to month after the first year. Both Daniel and I were listed as tenants, meaning either one of us had the right to end the agreement. I had been paying the full rent for months after Daniel left his job because he said the pregnancy stress made working difficult. I gave 30 days notice. The landlord accepted immediately. Next, I started investigating. I needed to know how deep this went. I searched for Samantha Reed. It didn't take long. Her profile appeared almost instantly, and there she was, smiling, happy, married to a man named Ryan Reed. Their photos were everywhere. Vacations, anniversaries, family gatherings. They looked completely in love. Then I saw Samantha's most recent post. It was from the day before. A picture of her and Ryan holding hands. The caption said, "Can't wait for the next chapter of our lives. One day we'll have the family we've always dreamed of." I stared at the screen. The irony was almost impossible to process, because Samantha had no idea Daniel was trying to drag her into a situation that could destroy her marriage. And Daniel had no idea I already knew everything. That was when I decided I was done protecting his secret. I created a new email account. I attached screenshots of Daniel's message. Then I wrote a short message to Samantha. "Congratulations! Daniel wanted me to let you know he's planning to put your name on the birth certificate for our baby. He says it's easier because of your insurance situation. I thought you should know before you become legally responsible for a child that isn't yours." I stared at the message for a long time. Then I clicked send, but I wasn't finished. Maybe it was petty. Maybe it was unnecessary. But after everything Daniel had done, I needed him to understand the consequences of treating people like pieces on a chessboard. So I went onto a gift website. I ordered a congratulations new parent basket. I sent it to Samantha's workplace, which I found through her professional profile. The card said, "From Daniel and the baby, can't wait for you to be involved." I knew it was dramatic. I knew it was a little cruel. But at that moment, I wasn't thinking about being the bigger person. I was thinking about how easily Daniel had planned to take away my place as my child's mother. By the time Daniel came home from the appointment, I had already started packing my things. He walked through the door smiling. "Hey, sorry you had to wait. The doctor said everything looks good." I looked at him. The man I thought I knew. The man who was about to become a father. The man who had just tried to hand my future to his ex. "That's great," I said. He didn't notice anything different. Or maybe he noticed and chose not to. That hurt even more. That evening, Daniel sat on the couch talking about baby names. "What about Olivia, if it's a girl?" I almost laughed. Because Olivia was the name of the person who had just explained how badly he could ruin his own life. Instead, I smiled. I nodded. I pretended. While he talked about nursery colors and parenting plans, I silently made a list of everything in the apartment that belonged to me. Everything I needed to take. Everything I needed to leave behind. Then, around midnight, his phone buzzed. Once. Twice. Then again. Daniel looked at the screen. His smile disappeared. What the hell? Another notification appeared. Then another. He stood up. What is going on? I watched him. For the first time all day, I saw fear on his face. A few seconds later, his phone started ringing. The caller ID appeared. Samantha, Daniel started arit. And I knew the truth had finally arrived. Daniel stared at Samantha's name flashing across his phone screen. For a few seconds, he didn't move. He just stood there in the middle of our living room holding the phone like it was something dangerous. Then he looked at me. Why is Samantha calling me this late? I shrugged. I don't know. It was the first time in days that I lied to him. And strangely enough, it didn't bother me. Because Daniel had been lying to me long before that. He declined the call. A few seconds later, she called again. Then again. His phone started filling with notifications. Message, missed calls, emails. Whatever was happening, it was happening fast. Daniel walked toward the bedroom, probably thinking I wasn't paying attention. But I followed quietly. Not because I wanted to spy. Because I needed to hear what he would say when he thought I wasn't listening. He finally answered. "What is your problem, Samantha?" There was a pause. Then his expression changed. "What?" I stood in the hallway listening. "What, baby? What are you talking about?" His voice became defensive, then confused, then nervous. "No, I never said that to you." Another pause. Then Samantha must have explained, because Daniel's face slowly lost all color. "You're kidding." He sat down on the edge of the bed. "You talked to Rachel." That name caught my attention. Ryan's wife. The woman Daniel had dragged into this without even knowing. "No, Samantha, listen to me. It's not what it looks like." A bitter laugh almost escaped me, because I had heard those exact words before. Every person caught doing something wrong always said the same thing. "It's not what it looks like," Daniel continued. "I never told her anything about this." A long silence. Then his voice lowered. "Wait, you're saying someone sent you the message?" I already knew where this was going. Finally, Daniel looked toward the hallway, and for a second our eyes met. He knew. I knew. The game was over. He quickly turned away. "Okay, I'll call you back." He ended the call. The room was silent. Then he walked toward me. "You sent that." I didn't answer immediately. Instead, I looked at him. "Sent what?" His jaw tightened. "Don't do this, Emily." I crossed my arms. "I'm just trying to understand what you mean." "You sent Samantha our conversation." "Our conversation." I laughed softly. "No, Daniel. I sent Samantha proof of your plan." His expression hardened. "You had no right." "No right?" I stared at him. "You planned to put another woman's name on our baby's legal documents." "It wasn't like that." "Then explain it." He opened his mouth. Nothing came out, because there was no explanation that made sense. Finally, he said, "It was just for insurance." There it was, the sentence that proved everything. Not an apology. Not regret. An excuse. "Insurance," I repeated. "Yes. Samantha has better coverage through her company. The baby would have access to better care." I looked at him in disbelief. "You mean our baby?" "Yes, our baby." "Then why were you trying to make another woman legally connected to her?" "Because it would have helped." I shook my head. "You keep saying that like the only thing that matters is convenience." Daniel became frustrated. "You don't understand the pressure I'm under." I almost smiled. "The pressure you're under." I pointed toward myself. "I'm pregnant, Daniel." "I know. I'm the person carrying this baby." "I know. And your solution was to erase me from the paperwork." "That's not what I was doing." "Then what were you doing?" He stayed quiet. And that silence answered everything. The worst part wasn't even what he planned. It was how normal he thought it was. How casually he had made a decision that could affect my entire life. Then he said something that made my stomach turn. "Samantha wouldn't actually have to do anything." I stared at him. "What?" "She wouldn't need custody or anything. It would just be paperwork." I couldn't believe what I was hearing. "You wanted to make someone else legally responsible for my child for 18 years, and you're telling me it's just paperwork." He rubbed his forehead. "You're exaggerating." "No, Daniel. You're minimizing." He looked away. And that was the moment I realized something. I wasn't arguing with the man who loved me. I was arguing with the man who had already decided my feelings were less important than his solution. The next morning, while Daniel was in the shower, his phone rang. I looked at the screen. "Rachel." I didn't answer. I let it go to voicemail. Later, when Daniel was distracted, I heard him play the message. Rachel's voice filled the room. "Daniel told me everything. If you or Samantha try to put my wife's name on any legal document, I will make sure you understand exactly what fraud means." Her voice was calm. Too calm. The kind of calm people have when they are completely done being manipulated. "I'm a lawyer, and I promise you I will not allow Samantha to destroy my family because she wants an easier solution." The voicemail ended. Daniel looked uncomfortable, but not because he felt guilty, because his plan was falling apart. That afternoon, I received a call from an unknown number. I answered. "Hello?" A woman spoke. "Is this Emily?" "Yes." "This is Rachel Reed." I sat down. "I know who you are." There was a pause. "I wanted to thank you. I didn't expect that." "Thank me." Yes. Samantha's actions could have destroyed my marriage and put my wife in a legal nightmare. I looked down. I didn't do it to help you. I know. Her voice softened. You did it because you were betrayed. That sentence hit harder than I expected. Because it was the first time someone understood. Not just the situation. The pain. Rachel continued. Can I ask you something? What? Is the baby Daniel's? I swallowed. I believe so. You believe so. I closed my eyes. After everything that happened, I'm getting a paternity test. Rachel was quiet. Then she said, You should. I know. Emily. Yes. Someone willing to replace you on a birth certificate for convenience makes me wonder what else they're willing to do when life gets difficult. I didn't answer. Because deep down, I had already started wondering the same thing. That evening, Daniel announced he was going to stay with his mother for a while. Not because he wanted space, because he wanted sympathy. My mom thinks I need somewhere calm. I looked at him. Your mom knows what happened. She knows you're upset. No. She knows you exposed what he did. He looked angry. Why are you making this bigger than it needs to be? I stared at him. Because you tried to make another person believe they were connected to my child. I was trying to help. You were trying to control the situation. His face softened. Emily, I love you. For a moment, I almost wanted to believe him. Almost. But then I remembered the message. The one he sent while sitting 10 feet away from me. The one where he decided my place as a mother was negotiable. I don't know if you love me, I said quietly, but I know you were willing to betray me. Daniel packed a bag. Before leaving, he turned around. You're really going to throw away our family over one mistake. I looked at him. One mistake. I shook my head. No, Daniel. A mistake is forgetting an anniversary. A mistake is saying something stupid during an argument. What you did was a decision. He left. 20 minutes later, my phone rang. It was his mother, Diane. The moment I answered, I could hear the anger in her voice. How could you do this to my son? I stayed silent. He's under so much stress. He's scared. He made a mistake. I closed my eyes. Diane, your son planned to put another woman's name on my child's birth certificate. He was confused. Confused people don't create plans. He's going to be a father. So am I. The line went quiet. Then she said, You're being cold. I looked around the apartment. The apartment where I had imagined raising my child. The apartment where Daniel had promised me a future. No, I said. I'm finally seeing things clearly. The next morning, I started moving my belongings out. I left the furniture. Most of it was his anyway, but I took everything I had bought. The television, my coffee machine, my books, the things that reminded me I'd built a life before Daniel tried to rewrite it. Before I left, I placed a note on the counter. Lease ends in 30 days. Good luck. And for the first time in weeks, I walked away feeling like I could breathe again. But I knew this wasn't over. Because Daniel wasn't just losing a relationship. He was losing control. And people who are used to controlling the story usually don't give up quietly. When Daniel came back to the apartment and saw what I had done, his reaction was exactly what I expected. Not sadness. Not regret. Anger. My phone started buzzing before he even walked through the door. Where are you? A second message came immediately. Where is all your stuff? Then another. You ended the lease. Are you serious? I stared at the screen. A part of me wanted to respond. Wanted to explain. Wanted him to finally understand why I left. But I knew Daniel. He wasn't looking for an explanation. He was looking for a way to make me the villain. So I didn't answer. 5 minutes later, You can't do this to me, Emily. I'm pregnant. I almost laughed, because somehow in his mind, the fact that I was carrying his child meant I had to accept anything he did, as if becoming a mother meant losing the right to protect myself. Then came the message I knew was coming. I'm calling the police. And he actually did. About an hour later, I received a call from an officer. Are you Emily Harper? Yes. We received a complaint regarding an apartment and missing belongings. I explained everything. The lease. The month-to-month agreement. The fact that I removed only my own property. The officer listened and then said, "Based on what you're describing, this sounds like a civil matter. You're allowed to remove your belongings." I thanked him. When I hung up, I sat there for a long time. Not because I was scared, because I couldn't believe I was in this situation. A person I loved was trying to use the system to punish me because I refused to accept his betrayal. And somehow I was still the one being accused of being cruel. The next person to call was Daniel's sister, Lauren. I almost didn't answer, but I knew eventually his whole family would get involved. "Emily, what are you doing?" Her voice was already angry. "I'm not sure what you mean. You left Daniel alone during the hardest time of his life." I closed my eyes. "Lauren, do you know what he did?" "Yes." "And you think I should stay?" "He made a mistake." "Isahil." "No. He made a plan. He was trying to make sure the baby had the best future." I couldn't believe she was saying that. "By putting another woman's name on my child's birth certificate." "You know what he meant." "Yes, I do." I paused. "He meant he wanted someone else to take legal responsibility while I stayed invisible." Lauren became quiet. Then she said, "You're abandoning your family." That sentence hurt. Not because it was true, because it showed me exactly how they saw me. Not as a person who had been betrayed, just as someone who was refusing to forgive. "I am not abandoning my child," I said. "If that baby is mine, I will be there every single day. But I will not stay with someone who thinks lying on legal documents is an acceptable solution." Lauren didn't have an answer for that. A few hours later, Daniel's father, Robert, called. His approach was different. He wasn't angry. He sounded disappointed. "Emily, I know you're hurt." "I am. And I know Daniel handled this badly." "Badly." I almost couldn't believe it. "He tried to legally connect our baby to another woman." Robert Sahil. "Can't you forgive him for the baby's sake?" I looked out the window. For months, I had imagined Daniel standing beside me at the hospital, holding our baby, starting a family. But now I understood something. A family cannot be built on pretending someone's betrayal didn't happen. "I can forgive him someday," I said. "But forgiveness doesn't mean I have to trust him again." Robert was silent. Then he asked, "So what happens now?" I answered honestly, "I get a paternity test. And if the baby is yours, I'll be her mother." "And Daniel?" I swallowed. "I don't know." Because that was the truth. I didn't know if Daniel could ever become someone I trusted again. Meanwhile, the situation with Samantha continued getting worse. Rachel had hired a lawyer. She sent Samantha a formal warning, telling her that any attempt to place Rachel's name on legal documents or continue contacting them would have consequences. I found out because Rachel forwarded me the screenshots. Apparently, Samantha had decided the best way to fix the situation was to message Rachel directly. Her first message was, "I think there has been a misunderstanding." Rachel responded, "There is no misunderstanding. You attempted to involve me in a lie." Samantha replied, "I only needed help with insurance." Rachel answered, "That is not help. That is fraud." Then, Samantha made the mistake of blaming Rachel. "Your wife is controlling you." Rachel's response was simple, "No. My wife protected me from becoming responsible for someone else's deception." After that, Samantha stopped responding. But she wasn't done. She turned to social media. She made a post about how difficult pregnancy was, about how some people abandon women when they need support most. She never mentioned the birth certificate. She never mentioned Daniel. She wanted sympathy without telling the truth. At first, I thought people would believe her. Then the comments started appearing. One person wrote, "Wait, is this about you trying to put someone else's name on the birth certificate?" Another said, "That's not being abandoned. That's someone protecting themselves." Then one of Samantha's own friends commented, "Girl, delete this. You're making yourself look worse." The post disappeared less than an hour later, but the damage was already done. People were starting to understand what happened, and Samantha hated losing control of the story. A few days later, Diane called me again. This time, she sounded different, less angry, more desperate. "Emily, please." I stayed quiet. "Daniel is struggling." I looked down. "Suang Wai, He misses you. I almost answered immediately, but I stopped. Because missing someone doesn't mean changing. I'm sorry, I said. But missing me doesn't erase what happened. Diane started crying. Think about the baby. I am thinking about the baby. That's why I'm doing this. She didn't respond. Because she knew I was right. The baby was exactly why I couldn't ignore what happened. A week later, I met with a lawyer. Not because I wanted to fight, because I needed protection. I learned that Daniel's messages could become important evidence. The screenshots, the conversations, everything showing his original intention. For the first time since the betrayal happened, I felt like I had some control again. Then came the moment that changed everything. 3 months after that terrible day at the clinic, my daughter was born. Her name was Sophia Harper. The first time I held her, everything else disappeared. The anger, the fear, the betrayal. For a few minutes, there was only her. My daughter. Perfect. Beautiful. Mine. But even in that moment, I knew the hardest battle was still ahead. Because Daniel was waiting, and he still believed that once the baby arrived, I would forgive everything. He was wrong. Because love can survive mistakes, but it cannot survive someone trying to erase you. Sophia was 2 weeks old when the next chapter of my life officially began. The hospital room was quiet that morning. I remember sitting beside her crib, watching her tiny fingers wrap around mine. For months, I had imagined this moment differently. I imagined Daniel standing beside me. I imagined us crying together when we saw our baby for the first time. I imagined a family. Instead, I was sitting there alone, realizing that the person I thought would protect me had been the person I needed protection from. But despite everything, I was happy, because Sophia was mine. And I knew one thing with absolute certainty. I would never allow my daughter to feel unwanted. Daniel arrived at the hospital that day, not because we had repaired anything, not because we were getting back together, because my lawyer had made it clear that he had the right to request a paternity test before signing any documents. At first, Daniel acted offended. You're really going to do this? I looked at him. After everything that happened, yes. He shook his head. You still don't trust me. I almost couldn't believe the question. No, Daniel. You gave me a reason not to. He became quiet. For the first time, he didn't have an excuse. He eventually agreed. The results came back 48 hours later. Sophia was my daughter. The relief was overwhelming. I cried when I read the results. Not because I doubted she was mine, but because the test represented something bigger. It proved that Daniel had not been able to take away my place in my daughter's life. But that relief was followed by something else. Anger. Because Daniel had been willing to let me spend months believing he was planning a future with me while secretly preparing a way to make another woman legally connected to our child. And then, somehow he still expected me to forgive him immediately. A few days after the results came back, Daniel came to my apartment. He looked nervous, but I could tell he had already convinced himself of what he wanted. We can fix this, he said. I stared at him. What? Emily Sophia is mine. She's ours. That's what matters. I stayed silent. He stepped closer. I knew it would work out. I knew she was my daughter. I felt my chest tighten. Because he said it, like the paternity test had somehow proven him right. Not like he had almost destroyed everything. So, what happens now? I asked. He smiled slightly. Now we move back in. We raise her together. I shook my head. No. His smile disappeared. What? We're not getting back together. His expression changed instantly. But why? I almost laughed. Because after everything, he still didn't understand. Because having a child together doesn't erase what you did. I made a mistake. No. I looked directly at him. You made a choice. His jaw tightened. I was scared. You were scared, so you planned to put another woman's name on our daughter's birth certificate. It was complicated. No. It was selfish. Daniel became angry. So you're really going to keep my daughter away from me? I shook my head. I'm not keeping her away from you. I'm asking for joint custody. His face changed, because I think he expected me to either forgive him or disappear. He never expected me to stand my ground. You can't take my baby. Our baby, I corrected. And I'm not taking her. I'm asking to be her mother. The custody process began almost immediately. Daniel tried to turn the situation around. Suddenly, I was the problem. His lawyer claimed I had abandoned him during pregnancy. They claimed I had acted emotionally. They claimed I was unstable. It was almost unbelievable. The same man who wanted to erase me from my daughter's legal identity was now arguing that I was the unfit parent. But I had evidence, and this time I wasn't afraid to use it. The court hearing was one of the most emotional days of my life. Daniel walked in with his family. His mother Diane sat behind him. His sister Lauren avoided looking at me. Daniel looked confident, like he believed he could convince everyone that he was the victim. His lawyer spoke first. Your Honor, my client was abandoned by Ms. Harper during a difficult pregnancy. He only wanted to provide the best possible future for his child. I sat there quietly, because I knew the truth was coming. Then, my lawyer stood. We would like to present evidence regarding Mr. Carter's original intentions. The first document was the message. The message Daniel sent me from the waiting room. The message where he explained his plan to put Samantha's name on the birth certificate. The courtroom became silent. The judge read it carefully, then looked up. Mr. Carter, did you write this message? Daniel shifted. Yes. Did you intend to place another person's name on the birth certificate? Daniel looked uncomfortable. It wasn't what it sounds like. The judge raised an eyebrow. Then, explain what it sounds like. Daniel struggled. It was for insurance. My lawyer continued presenting evidence. Messages between Daniel and me. Information showing Samantha was not the biological parent. Rachel's statement explaining how Samantha attempted to involve her in the deception. The warning letter from Rachel's lawyer. Everything. Finally, the judge looked at Daniel. Sir, do you understand that knowingly providing false information on legal documents can have serious consequences? Daniel looked down. I understand. The judge then looked at me. Ms. Harper, did you ever intend to prevent Mr. Carter from having a relationship with his child? No, Your Honor. Then what are you requesting? I answered honestly. Joint custody. I want my daughter to have both parents if that can happen safely. The judge made the ruling. Joint legal custody. A graduated physical custody schedule. I would have Sophia regularly eventually moving toward equal parenting time. Daniel was also ordered to attend counseling. The judge specifically warned both of us against attempting to manipulate or interfere with the other parent's relationship with Sophia. Daniel was furious. Outside the courtroom, he exploded. This isn't fair. I looked at him. What part? You're making me look like a bad father. I shook my head. No, Daniel, you did that yourself. After that day, things slowly changed. Daniel continued telling people his version of events. That I abandoned him. That I destroyed our family. That I was unforgiving. But the problem was, people knew the truth. Too many people had seen the evidence. Too many people knew about Samantha's name being used. The story he wanted to tell no longer worked. Rachel and Samantha eventually moved on from the situation. Months later, Rachel actually sent me a card after Sophia's birth. It was simple. It said, "Congratulations. She is lucky to have a mother who fought for her." I kept that card because it reminded me that sometimes strangers can understand your pain better than the person who caused it. Diane still occasionally contacted me, usually when Daniel needed something. Money, help, a favor. She once called asking if I could help pay Daniel's bills because he was struggling. I told her, I'm raising a child too. She said I was heartless. Maybe I was, but I learned something important. Being kind does not mean allowing people to hurt you repeatedly. A few months later, Daniel sent me one final message. A long apology. He said he had changed. He said he realized what he had done. He said maybe we could try again for Sophia. I read it carefully. Then I opened the original message he sent me months earlier, the one that started everything. And I sent him a screenshot. Nothing else. Just the truth. He called me immediately. I didn't answer. Because I finally understood something. The hardest part wasn't losing Daniel. The hardest part was accepting that the person I loved had never been the person I thought he was. Today, I have a small apartment closer to work, a nursery filled with more toys than Sophia will ever need, and a little girl who doesn't care about court battles, betrayal, or broken promises. She only knows that her mother loves her. I never expected to become a single mother at 31. I never expected the person I planned a future with would become someone I needed to protect myself from. But looking back now, I realize finding out the truth before marriage, before more children, before years of being trapped in that situation, was a blessing. And strangely enough, the moment that exposed everything started with one simple decision: sending that message. And maybe the gift basket I sent Samantha wasn't the most mature thing I've ever done. Maybe it was dramatic. Maybe it was petty. But after everything Daniel tried to take from me, that $89 gift basket was the price of finding out who he really was. And honestly, it was worth every penny.